What's up, you lazy, entitled, basement-dwelling millennials, bootstrapping boomers, apathetic Xers, and goddamn Gen Z kids today? Our topic today is going to be sort of red-blooded Americans who vote blue.
Fewer and farther between these days, but definitely still there.
Hey,
They didn't go anywhere.
We're out here. We're out here, and I think that's sort of been some of the appeal of my content. And we have an amazing guest today who I think that's a lot of the appeal of his content. Tate Hoskins, he's over 1 million. How many followers do you have on TikTok right now?
We're at 1.7.
1.7, man. Goals up here making me feel like, I'm just starting out. But he's on some of the other platforms as well, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But you kind of bring the alternative, as you put it, on your page to TikTok, and I love that. The alternative, solidarity, and it's a lot of preaching self-love in a Southern accent and a cowboy hat. And I think it really resonates with a lot of people who sort of feel unseen or fall between the cracks. But why don't you tell us your story, how you got from, who you are, how you got from where you were to where you are, and what kind of drives you to put yourself out there like you do.
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much for having me on. This is really exciting. Y'all are so sweet. So thank you so much for bringing me into the space. Just for a little bit of background, I've been doing social media for a few years now, getting paid for it at least. And it's really funny because I grew up in a super small rural town. So like we grew up very poor, we live in the Bible Belt. And so you kind of grow up in this little bubble. And as I got older and sort of explored myself and explored the world and learned about so many cool things, I've been very blessed to start doing social media and like bringing a little bit of like recognition into my little small town. And, so that's where we started. We started literally at the bottom, but now we've grown with time, and we kind of give like a good elevated voice to the small rural part of Kentucky and the nation.
What motivated you? I mean, you said just to kind of bring some. What was the defining moment where, hey, I'm going to start doing shit on the internet? Did you have one, or was it just kind of something you diddled around with, and at one point one thing just took off?
Yeah, it's so interesting to think about because, and I don't say this in a braggadocious way. I swear, I'm a humble person. Please believe me. But I've always been sort of like this outspoken voice, even in my like real life off of social media. I have a very distinct memory of this girl that I grew up with. We would pick her up on the bus every morning, and she was very, very poor. And so the house that we would pick her up at, you could tell just it was a dilapidated trailer, and you would hear stories about her having to take baths in the creek, and like her and her siblings just really coming from, if we're poor in a small town and you're hearing about a poor girl or a poor person, they are living in poverty. Yeah. And I remember I went to school and I actually made fun of her. This was really early. This was probably second, third grade. But I made fun of her, and one of my teachers who I loved and respected overheard me talking about her and the fact that she had to take a bath in the creek. And I just remember that teacher looking at me dead in the eye and being so disappointed with me and saying to me, like, she is a human being. And just really, I swear to God, I think that moment instilled this sense of, oh my God, I never want to feel this way again. I never want to put someone in a scenario where they're being targeted or being bullied. And like, that was the moment. I think from then on, I've always been this like, no, we're gonna stand up for the kid, and we're gonna stand up for this person and these disadvantaged people. And I just naturally translated that over into TikTok. Like, it is a character, but it is kind of like a real part of who I am at my core, is like always speaking up for the anyone who's underprivileged and taken advantage of.
I think it's incredible how sometimes it's just that one defining moment in your life that kind of ends up changing like who you are and forming basically the foundation of who you become as a person. And that can be, you know, turning you into somebody who preaches self-love and trying to take care of people and stand up for people, or can make you just a complete and total douchebag, just depending on how that goes.
Yeah. Did you actually do you have like a story where you remember like a moment where you were like, I'm going to stand up for people. Like, I'm going to take that stand.
Yeah, there was a few times. I have a really convoluted, you know, childhood like history of divorced parents very young, and then mom moved me to Florida, and I had step parents and sort of step parents that lasted a really long time, and then like they all got divorced sort of around the same time in my life and stuff. So it went back and forth, and I was, you know, public school in South Florida for elementary school, and then homeschooled, and then public school in Minnesota for the rest of high school. And there was a lot of learning processes that went on through all of these stages in my life. And I think coming in, because I've always been a pretty maybe slightly overconfident, some people would say, type of person, very opinionated. And coming into high school in, you know, rural small town Minnesota, after not being one of the people, my family's from here. I sort of grew up here, but I wasn't from here. I wasn't, you know, I didn't go to kindergarten with these kids and everything. It was weird being the person who's like confident, but also being the person who's getting bullied, you know, by coming into that sort of thing. So it gave me a lot of self-awareness in that situation. And it was hard, but I'm kind of glad that like it happened to me, because I have thick enough skin to take that as the lesson of, I wouldn't want anybody else to feel like this or worse than this. And I saw, and I saw some of the other people, and I was fortunate enough, you know, the girls always liked the new meat when you came, you know, to a small town school, and it's like, oh, there's something we haven't seen before. So like, it was kind of that weird thing of like, the guys, a lot of the guys were bullying me or just not being very nice. Even people that I'd known for a long time, now suddenly I'm in their sphere and they can't be seen with me. But then all of the girls were like kind of like flocking to me. And so it was like, it was this really weird dichotomy of, things that were happening, and it gave me where I still felt like I had enough sort of influence and sway to stand up for some people, because I could handle being bullied and didn't give a shit. And you know, you give a shit a little bit. It always like hurts and it sticks with you. And like, I still remember some of the stuff that like people did, you know, 15 years later. But I think a lot of that. And there was this one girl who got picked on a lot. She's wasn't fully developmentally all there, and you know, physically very easy to pick on for people and stuff too. And I felt really bad for her, and that was kind of my moment of seeing somebody who was always alone in every situation in her life and didn't have a good home life. And I was like, you know what, it was that moment where I'm like, I don't give a shit what people think of me or see or say. I'm going to let her sit with me at lunch, so at least there's one moment of the day that she feels like somebody to talk to. And that was one of the best moments I felt. And then there was sort of kind of that opposite of, there was one kid who was overly annoying who also kind of got picked on a lot, and I didn't really pick on him, but I didn't stand up for him, and I sort of turned the cold shoulder to him when he tried to interact with me, and I felt really bad. Like, that's always stuck with me, is I felt really bad about that all of these years. So it was sort of those two things happening at the same time in my life that have kind of brought me to the point where I'm like, I'm willing to be the punching bag in front of people and stand up for, you know, people who maybe don't have as much of a voice.
Amen. Yeah, that's a really powerful message, and I resonate fully with pretty much everything you said about just having the thick skin and being able to eat those punches so that other people don't have to. You know, like, it really does. It makes you want to help other people and like to give other people that safe space. So yeah, that's awesome. And thank you so much for sharing that with me. That's really
absolutely
cool.
No, thank you for sharing. What about you, Taylor? I don't think we've had this conversation. Where did you get, like, obviously, you know, you got a little bit more conservative background of a family, and you're very left to the left, and like, how did you get there? Where obviously, you know, upper middle class bringing and everything, like, you don't have a whole lot of incentive to give a shit about other people.
Yeah, no, that's a fair question. Although I do want to just state right away, I'm really loving the fresh meat part about that whole story. I'm sure Emily's gonna absolutely love that.
With that.
Emily is gonna love to hear about this part of the episode.
Oh, I know. And the funny thing is, I was like, I can say whatever I want in here because she's never gonna watch them. And now she's like, I want to be supportive. Every Sunday, let's take an hour and just watch one of your episodes. You can pick. And I'm like, great. I just thought about that as it was coming out. This is gonna be a fun one. I love you, babe. Love you so much.
Yeah. No, I guess honestly, I think it's mostly just kind of my personality. I've just always kind of been, I guess, a little bit more caring. My mom is like always says I was like the kindest kid, and I could say growing up, like I absolutely made friends with a lot of the kids who maybe didn't fit into conventional groups, and tried to be friends with them. I would say I was certainly like jerkish in some ways. Growing up in like middle school, I was a pretty successful athlete going up into like middle school, early high school, and so it kind of made me a dick in a way, in some ways. But never to a point where I never took it to where I thought I was like better than somebody as a person. It was always just about the physical activity, and definitely didn't try to make people feel bad for that, but I was just kind of like a general kind of dick for a little bit, and then I
realized for the best of us.
I realized what I was doing, and a few people like made comments. I was like, shit, like is that how I'm sounding to them? And so like I just sort of made a change internally, and so that's my little jock story, whatever. But I just see people who are suffering, and I don't know, it just hurts inside to feel, especially when we should be doing stuff about it. We should be doing more.
And we have the ability to do more. Like there's options to do more to make it so people's lives don't suck so bad all the time.
Right. Exactly.
No, so I think something that why our content tends to resonate with people is because obviously there's stereotypes and there's structure of like what people assume. Like if you are, if you're a rural person, you're a straight white Republican, conservative values, if you're from New York or you're from LA, you are, if you're from LA, you got blue hair and don't know which bathroom to use and like whatever, like people have these ideas, and I think a lot of people don't understand, especially people who are more progressive around it's fair to say that you're on the left of progressive. Am I overstepping boundaries there?
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
And for people on the left, in general, they get in bubbles a lot of the times. Like if you're in a big city, a big blue city, and you're surrounded by people who are like-minded, it gets really easy to forget that there are people that are like-minded that are different from you outside, and you start to think that everybody out in our God's country, so to speak, is is a specific way, and the people who are out here, they live in that bubble. If they are straight white conservatives, they live in sort of that bubble where they're surrounded by those people. And even if you're not one of those people, it can get scary to speak up. And I mean, that's just having different ideologies is you shut your mouth and you don't talk politics. If you don't have a flag on your truck and a red hat, you keep your fucking mouth shut because people have some opinions. I was even at the bar once, and a guy, for no reason, alcohol was involved, and some biker guy had been just talking to me annoyingly, like sitting next to me for a while. And then he said something that I'm like, I can't abide anymore. It was some vaguely racist or classist comment. And he stood up and did like this Superman thing where he tore his shirt open and had a Trump shirt underneath it. And I'm like, this is one of the fucking funniest things I've ever seen in my goddamn life. But also, is this real life? But this is the things that people have to deal with. And for me, I'm like, you're a fucking moron and can go fuck yourself, and I don't care. But a lot of people feel very afraid of that, and that's just on an ideology thing. But like, you're a member of the LGBTQ community, and that adds a whole nother layer to that, right? Like, and if you're Muslim or you're atheist or whatever happens to be, you're in the Bible Belt, happens to fit into that. And I think that that's the reason that content like yours specifically, and mine to an extent as well, resonates with people, is it gives a little bit of that voice that, hey, I'm not the only one out here. I'm not alone. And have you felt that same way? Do you feel, have you gotten that? I've gotten that from a few followers. Have you gotten that from your audience at all?
Yeah, tremendously. It's really funny just hearing you talk about, how these people fit in this sector, and they act and dress and do these things. And like, one of the biggest parts of my platform, and this goes under the surface, behind the curtain, however you want to phrase it, but like, everything we do as creators, or at least everything I do as a creator, I kind of do it intentionally. I there's some intention behind it to some degree. And I tell people that I am culturally appropriating like rednecks, because this is like the culture of people that have really caused a lot of issues for me in my life, and cause a lot of the issues that sort of persist in our culture. And that's no shade to rednecks. Like, my whole family's redneck, love them to death. But I do bring in the aesthetic, and I think it catches a lot of people off guard. I think when you click on a video, or you're scrolling and you see this white guy with a cowboy hat, and you're like, oh brother, you're already rolling your eyes. And it's funny because I've even amped it up sometimes. I will sort of do things that give people this like moment of where they're typing the mean comment out. They're like, oh, F this guy, because I'll start a video and sort of play into that characterism, and then immediately address it like, yeah, I know what you're thinking that I am, but I am not that thing. So yeah, it is really funny to kind of take a step back and look at it from a third party perspective. But it is really hard. I think in my real life, there's so many people, and you can't say this kind of thing sort of like in the space of being online, but I will tell you guys and your audience and my audience, like, I have racist family members. Like, I have homophobic family members. I have sexist family members. Like, and not just family members, but like really close family members. Right. And it's really, really common here for people who are progressive to have to like constantly be in this space of sort of like treading on, ice, where you say the wrong thing, or you get, your racist uncle started at Thanksgiving. He won't shut up. So I think it is a breath of fresh air for people to be on their For You page and swipe and see a guy wearing a baseball cap and glasses and a work shirt, a bright green shirt. And they're like, oh, brother, here this guy goes. He's going to say some of the worst things I've ever heard. And to hear, someone like you or me come across as like, oh, no, this is actually a really empathetic person. And this is someone who like I wish I had in my life growing up, or someone who I wish that I would have, been able to be friends with in school. Like, I think giving that sort of oh my God, what's the word? The representation is so important. So yeah, it's really cool.
And I think that TikTok does specifically like a better job of that than even Instagram or obviously Facebook, Twitter, but just TikTok specifically has done such an amazing job at bringing people
communities, like specific communities, connecting you with the community that you should belong to and you've never been able to find. It really,
I feel like it creates less echo chambers, because there's not just like a massive like comment board on like just everything. It's like you have to find somebody, and if there might be in your community or not, but you're not posting like just to a giant board. You're posting on one specific thing that they're saying or making a video on, and it still can be toxic, certainly, the comment section, but it's not like this like rage baity, just like trolling like situation all the time.
Well, and some people obviously do make content that way, but to your point about echo chambers, and obviously TikTok tries to push you towards the shit it thinks you want to engage with, but I have noticed that there's a lot of people that say, like, they'll leave comments, and they're respectful comments, and be like, I almost never agree with anything you say, but I appreciate this perspective, or I appreciate your opinion. And it's like, I appreciate the fact that you are here and you are willing to listen to a different perspective. I don't want you to agree with me. If you don't want to agree with me, or like whatever, that's fine. The fact that you are willing to step out of that echo chamber and listen to it and see that, hey, maybe you disagree with a lot, but you like the random motorized shit I have around, or the dogs do it for you, or the horse, or like something that connects us as people, and you see me as a person with different ideas and opinions, then great. And you are willing to then hear those, and sometimes we'll find common ground on that stuff. I have so much respect for that. And I'm sorry, I cut you off earlier there. What were you going to say?
No, you're fine. I was just going to kind of just go to add on to that point. Yeah, I think if you take a look at like Twitter, for example, I think you get a lot more insight to like what an echo chamber just really personifies versus TikTok. I think TikTok has really blown the top off of this idea of, we are one collective hive mind, or we are this one collective ideology. It's really this Mod Podge, like really is kind of like a mixing pot, and it's really funny because a lot of times, like I know I've made videos where I've told my audience who are way, really far on the left and really far progressive, and I've been like, look, you guys, like, you can't hate these people all the time. Like, you have to have a little love in your heart. You have to be a little compassionate and a little empathetic, even if they're not being that way to you. It's important that you keep that about yourself, because the conversation around social issues and the conversation around progressive thoughts, it dies when we silence the other person, right? It's that is dead once you get to that point where you're like, it is hopeless, you cannot get to these people, like then yeah, you're never going to. So it's really important to keep that echo chamber a little less echoey, I think, as we do this.
No, I agree 100%. And kind of one of the things that you mentioned about, having racist, sexist, bigoted family members, homophobic family members, and whatnot, some that you're really close to. And, I can say the same. I don't think that you like to think better of the people who you're close to, obviously, so you tend to give them a little bit more of a pass in general. But I even want to extend it to like friends, people that I am, very close friends with, some people that I can rely on no matter what, have very different ideologies than me on politics, and a lot of that stuff comes with certain comments that I just cringe when they're said. And it's one of those things where I wonder how you kind of handle these situations, because I know for me it's very much a pick your battle thing, and then sometimes I feel like I'm being unauthentic or disingenuous, because obviously I get on the internet every day and I run people. I read them the riot act for saying something racist or sexist, or I stand up for people, and then it's like when we're in those situations, those circles, those groups, when it's just those people around, it's like, all right, this isn't a battle I'm willing to pick right now, because this isn't a friendship that I want to lose. And then it's like, should you be friends with those kinds of people? And obviously then you start going through those justification processes in my head of, I know who these people are, where they grew up, what they grew up around, and the fact that they probably really don't see how this is problematic. And unfortunately, I don't have the ability to explain that to them in this context. And obviously, they know I'm on TikTok. They've seen all of my stuff. They know these things. And a lot of times, they've just learned to shut the fuck up, because when we do talk about it, it gets interesting. But, like... how do you kind of deal with that? Do you ever feel like you're being inauthentic or disingenuous when you pick those battles?
Yeah, it's an incredibly layered thing for me, especially because I am openly gay, to all of the people that I meet and interact with. It is one of those really interesting situations, because I'm going to kind of draw a parallel here. So last year I went deer hunting and got my first buck, which was really awesome.
Congratulations, man.
When I was thank you. It was a 10-pointer, so I'm really proud of myself.
Nice.
Uh, so I went to this. It's like a deer camp. We call it deer camp. Basically, a bunch of redneck guys get together and we camp out and like go hunt deer on the first day of hunting season. So you can probably use your imagination and guess the personal politics and things like that.
The locker room talk.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah. Real heavy on the locker room talk. And, I'm sitting there and I'm this like, I think I do present a little bit more masculine around those people. I think on the internet, I feel a little bit more comfortable with my audience. So you get a little bit more flamboyant, Tate, which is great. But around these men, my guard's up. So I have to kind of keep that macho, image.
Put that little bass in your voice.
You'll be in this space. Yeah, you got to put a little bass in the voice, dude. You got to get a little slang with it. You got to get a little bit more country. So it's hard because I'm sitting here and I'm like, I'm gay. And I think some of them know or some of them don't really know what gay means. So they're just like, there's Tate, and I'm hearing them say things that are really, really not great, not good things. And in my head, you have to kind of take those pieces of information and to me, and maybe this is something I do subconscious, you may relate, but I kind of build this image of trauma that they've gone through of sort of the way they were raised. What is their background? What is their religion? All these things. And I create this sort of dialogue or this dynamic with those people where I show them, hey, I'm gay and I'm a liberal. Like I'm very much progressive. I stand up for trans people. I stand up for people who are, disenfranchised, all these things. I am also a normal person and I am a human being, and you and I are having a great conversation about it. And it is okay for you to like accept me just as much as you can accept these people. And so it's really important for me to, in those moments where I'm with people who are, bigoted or whatever the case is, to talk to them and treat them, like a human being. And despite how awful they may think or how awful their ideologies are, that, like I said earlier, you will never change someone's mind if you are berating them and if you are meeting them with violence or with animosity. I think you have to kind of know when to hold them and when to fold them. So that's how I handle it. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, and that's okay. The people that it doesn't, I'm just like, all right, see ya. Don't bother me.
I think that's a good point. I had an experience last night, actually. So I somehow signed up for involvement in my local our local Democratic Party, Democratic Farmer Laborers, DFL. It was one of those things. I showed up to a caucus, and then suddenly people are like, "Well, you should just sign up. It doesn't really mean anything. Sign on the dotted line here." And now I'm a director of something. I have no idea what. And so I've been horrible at it. I've missed everything that I should have shown up to probably so far. But last night they were doing just a little local thing at a fellow DFLer's house. It was right down the road from me. So I'm like, cool, I'll make this. It's a Tuesday night. I got nothing going on. I can make that happen. And I go over there and I walk in, and it's like if I could have built my own, like, I wanted to build my own place a while back, and I wanted it to be a shop with living quarters in the back, and like I had it all mapped out in my head, and we ended up buying a different house and property instead. And I walk in, and this is like exactly that. Like I would have built this place for myself, and the guy's got 3 classic Buicks in there and a Mustang he's storing for somebody else that are just mint, and one he's in the middle of like converting into electric car, which I think is just cool as shit. Like I'm a gearhead. This is the stuff I love. And of course he comes over, he starts showing me all around, telling me about all of his cars and everything. And so now this is rural Minnesota, and obviously the first thing I notice is this is a place that I would live. This is shit I would drive and hobbies I would have. And then we start talking about stuff, and he doesn't like, he's openly gay, but it wasn't like, you don't walk up and say like, "Hi, I'm gay." Like I'm Bob and I'm gay type of thing, I started to pick up. I was like, oh, because he kept talking about Pride and how he's really involved in the Pride celebration that we have in our little small town here and everything. And I'm like, okay, cool. Starting to make sense now, because he's like, I never got married, never had kids. I'm retiring on Friday. I was like, sweet, good for you. And then it like clicked for me. And I was like, this is the approach that we need to be taking to kind of bridge some of these gaps. Is like, people around here have no exposure to different people. And they get this idea built up in their head. They have an archetype that's built by conservative media, by their stereotypes that they kind of echo chamber off of each other. And pretty soon, that is what they think, this mythical creature of what, a progressive is, or a gay person is, or a trans person is what they've...
the boogeyman, yeah.
Exactly. They've constructed in their mind. And I'm like, this was one of those things. Like, I walked in here, I had no idea. We connected on something that is very much something that anybody in rural Minnesota, rural anywhere, would connect on. And this is the foot forward to get people to understand that, what, progressives are people too. All of these people are people too. And that's kind of the step that it should change. And then to build on that, they were talking about the parade schedule and trying to get people to sign up to help with parades. And I'm like, what the fuck who goes to a fucking parade anymore? Like, why? Like, I get it. Like, it's politics. You got to go walk in parades and do your shit. But like, nobody goes to a parade. And one of the candidates that was there said, why we do parades is because the people who live out here, who feel really isolated, go to the parade, and they see that there is other local members of their community who are willing to stand up as a open Democrat, and or in this case, when we do our Pride festivals, open Pride and that sort of thing, and it makes them feel less alone, which is very similar to what we were talking about with our content here. So, it's a long rambling story about myself that probably didn't need to be told, but I thought that it fit really well with your hunting story. And just how you try to present and handle those things without being overly confrontational on it.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for sharing that. That honestly, it is so profound what the human connection can lead to, and how quickly it can change someone's perception on something that they may have thought one way their whole life, and then they're kind of like floored because all those thoughts are, kind of weak and they don't make sense and they're not real and all those great things. So that's an awesome story. I'm glad you shared it.
Oh, thank you. I know. Yeah, you had a interesting situation. I don't know how much you want to share or talk about, but
they won't listen to this. That's for sure. No, just too much to drink, too late at night, conservative father figure, and myself, and I thought I was doing a pretty good job of listening, trying to listen.
Keep it civil.
Yeah. And, kind of it got to a point where he was like, you guys just don't know anything. And we're like, well, where should we go to find this information that you have? And didn't really say much. We're just like, what do we have to be you at what your age is? Is that before we can have an opinion? And didn't end well. And it's just rough to even when you try to engage in good faith and just at least understand, if you, even at the end of the day, you absolutely you're like, I don't know how that makes sense in reality, but just having the conversation of, how wide are the differences of our, unfortunate realities, I guess, but that wasn't really that fun.
No.
This time. This was the worst time of any of the time. I definitely had conversations with family members before that have been somewhat productive, at least, or I don't know. I guess now I have this podcast, so I don't talk politics with my family all that much because I don't have the urge.
You have the outlet, finally.
I have the outlet, so I don't bring it up anymore. But stuff does get brought up, and I just try to be restrained. Show restraint, and just be like, try to be that kind of voice in the back, seat is like, hey, I think you missed your turn back there, sort of thing, without being like the backseat driver.
Yeah, no, it speaks to the difficulty of trying to navigate personal relationships when just ideologies have become so tribalized and political, identity politics has infiltrated literally every single part of everybody's life. Like, if you drive an electric car, you are now fitting into a box. And it's like, I just liked the car type of thing, you know, or that sort of thing.
It go fast.
Yeah.
And it's weird how everything has become so politicized, and it's difficult for everybody to navigate those if you aren't in lockstep with the rest of the people in your family.
Yeah, I guess as far as identity politics go, I understand why it's so pervasive now, is because it helps us find people, because it is difficult to find people that are like you, that think like you.
This is my club.
Right. And that's a good thing. But then the bad side of thing is where if you don't allow yourself to have any sort of, I don't want to say middle ground, because you shouldn't be having to give up what, you know, your values in order to just exist in the same space as other people. Right. But the way that people talk about it, it's only a bad thing if you make it the only thing about you. If you make it part of you, but you still allow yourself to have, you know, a personality or you know, be a person, kind of like what you're saying when you're going to, you know, a hunting club, and like you're not just a gay guy. You are also somebody who likes to hunt and like to hang out at fire pits and drink beers with people, you know, like that's
something we all have in common, like
right?
That sort of thing.
I think if you have a problem with identity politics, I think it says more about you than what says somebody who identifies as like understanding that identity politics is important.
I agree.
Amen. I love it. That is a great way to articulate that. I absolutely agree.
It's funny. Your story too sort of reminds me of an old Jeff Foxworthy bit about like if they did Queer Eye for the Straight Guy back, you know, when they like used to like remodel houses and shit, but it was like the opposite, where it was like one gay guy and a bunch of rednecks took him hunting. And it's a bit you should go. I encourage everybody, you know, it's Jeff Foxworthy. It's about as clean as you're going to get. And for the time, I would say still it aged well enough for a joke on that topic. But it was the first thing that came to mind when you started talking about how you went to hunt camp with a bunch of good old boys from Kentucky. But going on to the importance of kind of like shifting perceptions and making rural red America more accepting to everybody, because obviously like it's tough growing up being the odd one out, and it can feel very, very isolated. And I think that you are even more uniquely able to do that than someone like me, because I'm a straight white guy who grew up very much embracing, you know, rural Minnesota, and I fit most of the archetypes of a straight white guy. I just happen to have traveled enough and have enough of an education to have hopefully outgrown some of my ignorance in life and embrace my empathy a little bit more. And I think we were talking a little bit before the show started that you're really wholesome content here on the front side of you know, Tate Hoskins, TikTok, and all of that has a little more risque alter ego behind it, which adds to a whole nother perception. Obviously, OnlyFans type of you called it sex work, so I'll go with sex work, is much more common now than it ever used to be. I think a lot of us know somebody who does that. Well, I shouldn't say ever used to be, but like it's more common among the people you know. It's more accepted, I think, among the people you know. And you're just kind of taking that to the next level of being a rural gay man doing that. You know, like we know half a dozen people in small town rural America that women that do that very commonly, because it's sometimes one of the best or easiest ways for them to make a living while they're still raising kids or doing whatever they're doing.
Right.
Do you think that you would have been able to do that 10 years ago? Do you think that the perception is changing and making it easier for you to do that and be somewhat open about it? Do you think that shifting is important? Do you think it's gone the wrong direction with the fact that obviously there's kind of been a resurgence of bigoted ideals and people crawling out from under their rocks, feeling emboldened by certain geniuses who have the best words?
Yeah. So, on the subject of sex work in general, I think, being in the South, being in the Bible Belt, like you really grow up with this very, very deep sense of shame around sex and your body and, marriage and all these really, really heavily ingrained parts of our culture. It's fascinating. I mean, it is truly fascinating. And, I am a huge proponent of sex work. I learned recently, this is like within the last few years, since I started, that the sex work industry is the oldest trade in the world. It is the first documented trade. And I think that is just a testament to how prevalent, sexuality and how prevalent, intimacy and romance and all those things have been through the human experience from the beginning of time. And so for me, I'm a huge advocate for people to go and do what makes them happy. And sex work does make me happy. It's like a very fulfilling thing. And I have to bend the way that I, phrase that to people around here. But I do, I always encourage people to look at things with an open mind. I'm currently in the works of like trying to figure out how to actually do a podcast myself. I want to do a sex work related podcast that just talks about some of the really heavy topics and stuff like that. But that's, of course, future plans, future projects. But for now, I just sort of, I have the wholesome TikTok and then I have the fun sex work stuff on the side. And I just sort of advocate for people to do what makes them happy. If it doesn't hurt anybody else, like go do your thing,
Like the shifting of that perception, because like it was obviously like a very taboo thing, and obviously perceptions change. Like online dating at one point was like the weird thing that, you were obviously you're not good enough to find any people in real life and you got to switch to online, to now people are like, you're going to the bar to meet somebody? What the fuck is wrong with you? Yeah, and fucking weirdo. You're just bringing roofies with you? Who goes to the bar to meet people? And it's weird how those kinds of things change. And obviously, like the LGBTQ community has kind of undergone that transition, and I definitely think it seems from an outsider's perspective easier to exist in all spaces, even rural spaces like this. I have gay friends and family members who live, here in rural Minnesota, and they know people and people know them, and they get along just fine. And you don't see that kind of like the things when they said they were moving back home up here, that I was like, oh boy, like I'm not sure how that's going to go type of thing. And I've been pleasantly surprised in that sense, but it's very different, obviously the shit you see online and you see in the comment sections versus what you're going to say when you're face to face with somebody and they're a human being that you register as a human being and not a face on a screen or a username. But like, how do you feel like the shifting of that perception, I mean, is obviously important. And how do you feel like the work that you're doing and making that shift is affecting people's lives? And do you think that it's going backwards or not with kind of the way that we've had, again, the trolls crawling out from under their bridges?
Yeah. To answer your question too, I realized I totally skipped over it. To answer your question, do I think that I would have done this 10 years ago? I would love to think that I would have. It has always been something that I've sort of leaned into, I think, a little bit more than most people. But it is interesting because being so involved in this space around sex work and even transcending sex work and going into like individuality and like being LGBT friendly or sex friendly in general as a society, I think that we are still progressing. I think like every generation has their version of the boogeyman, right? Every generation has their version of the thing that's taboo in that time. And, over the course of time, people realize, hey, this is actually an incredibly normal human experience. this thing that we've been up in arms about for so long doesn't really affect us at all. And so I think if you were to look at it like on a chart, like a graph, I think you'd see like, you know, a little spike in people giving a shit, and then it would drop down, and then it would go a little spike in something else, and then it would drop down. It's like always this thing. So I think we are seeing a lot of people sort of be outspoken against trans people and like gender and individuality and all those things, self-expression. But I think that the overall sort of cultural acceptance of those things is on the increase. It's just we're at that little spike right now, and I think it'll kind of teeter back down as the younger generation, you know, they're kind of crazy, and I say that with love in my heart. Okay, they're a little cuckoo, they're a little out there, and I love them for that. But yeah, I think it'll just continue to shift more progressive, and you know, that's just human nature. We're gonna progress, and we're gonna do and accept new things. So
you're definitely a tad bit more on the loving side than I am. I certainly will choose will choose violence when people, you know, choose violence against people that don't deserve violence showed against them. And I always have I have admiration for like people like yourself who take every message and make it as positive as it can be, because I believe bullying's okay if you're bullying a bully. Like that's sometimes you teach people that, you know, it doesn't feel good when it happens to me in those types of situations, and if somebody is good enough at putting you in your place, I don't know, it makes me feel better sometimes, but it's not always the most productive thing in the world, and I know I get carried away with it from time to time, and I don't know how you manage to keep the smile on and keep the message positive and, you know, love in your heart for the people who hate you type of thing. It's impressive.
You know, I will say it is challenging in moments to kind of hold your tongue or to bite your tongue, and I truly I would love to sit here and be like, I am always forthcoming with love and positivity no matter what. But the reality is that I do find myself identifying with the meeting violence with violence trait a lot more often. But I do think the idea is that we as a culture should be more empathetic and understanding of others. And even if those other people are not that way with us, I think that, you know, it is from a humanitarian sort of perspective, the best way to resolve issues is to like resolve the issue and not to like lash out. But I also lash out a lot, maybe off camera more so than like on camera. But yeah,
and I think sometimes making an example of somebody who is repeating harmful rhetoric by, you know, and that's what I strive to do, is like I'm taking one person and I will berate them in a way that hopefully makes them feel like absolute shit, and they are going to remember, and then hopefully everybody else who watches that says like, I've said that rhetoric before, and I don't want somebody to A, think of me that way, and then B, somebody to call me out like that where I can't come back from it, and hopefully give them that opportunity to grow as a person and realize, you know, sometimes it takes a little bit of a shoulder shake to realize that, hey, I'm kind of being an asshole, and maybe I need to look at this from a different perspective, or I need to just keep these thoughts internal, because I can be an asshole in my head and nobody can call me out for it, you know? And I think making bigots scared to be openly bigoted again has its value in places.
Oh, 100%. And you know, I again, even just to further that idea of I wish I were this way, but the reality is I'm a lot different. You know, there's moments where I will even have thoughts or reactions to things that are from a place of, you know, being a white man or being a man in general. Like, you know, I realize like I've been conditioned to think of things through a certain lens. So we all have those moments, you know, we all have those moments where we start to feel like, oh, I want to say this, but I'm going to be an asshole. But I think you're exactly right. Like what we do, you and I, on our platforms is sort of take the general idea of something and expound on that idea for a lot more people to consume. And it even though I think sometimes we can get a little targeted, quote unquote, targeted towards a certain person, it's usually more so the idea that we are tearing down versus tearing down the person. And I have maybe crossed that line a time or two in the time that I've been making videos. So
it's hard not to. But no, I think that is an excellent distinction.
Yeah, I mean, you look at like specifically like a group of people, especially, and if somebody who thinks the same way that like a group of like KKK people, like if they're saying the same stuff, like they probably heard that rhetoric from somebody who's a part of that organization, or if they're part of that organization, like, or just the propaganda of that organization. And I don't have an issue with like if you're just saying the same stuff that's been like materialized from like the most evil place, where like you just ultimate like bigotry in an organized, monetized fashion. Like, I'm not saying like shred that person to pieces, like as a person, whatever, but be like, there's no way you can think about people the same way once you shed light on just how, just, I don't know. Certainly people don't give a fuck what you say about them, but
it's always okay to punch Nazis, is what we're getting at, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
If
you're wearing a white hood, you know, it's like, if you're gonna be part of a group that literally like murdered thousands of people across the South, I don't really care.
Yeah,
like, you've done the atrocities, right now.
I think that's a good point. And it's hard because obviously, I get so much for the tolerant left, or people tell me, I've got so much hate in my heart on a lot of the content that I do when I'm like just calling up. And it's a lot of times it's on politicians, like like Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert, and they'll be like, "Oh, you're such a hateful person." And I'm like, towards a person who does nothing but spew hate, and what I'm doing in being aggressive or quote unquote hateful towards them is showing that all the people that they are belittling and oppressing are loved and seen and recognized, and that person is the problem, not them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think the part that a lot of people don't find the nuance in is like, when we have these conversations and these kind of like videos where we're addressing things, I think most of the time it's like there's a big difference between like John from Illinois, who was raised in a Southern Baptist household, who feels a certain way about gay marriage, versus like the KKK. Like there's a huge difference there. And I think that as an audience or as a consumer, I think it's important to always be able to understand and read in between the lines. Is this person mad at the idea, or is this person mad at the person? And I think like a Nazi, punch the Nazi, of course.
Yep.
But John from Minnesota is not really doing a whole lot of bad by just like sharing
his
homophobic
personal
memes on Facebook. Like it's not great.
Right. It could be worse, but it could be better, but it could be a lot worse. No, I agree. I think that this kind of speaking up is what, on a platform like what we have here, gives people the opportunity to, again, we've said earlier, feel like they're not alone and feel like they are represented, understood by other people in the communities that they identify with or they reside in. And it hopefully emboldens them to kind of take those steps to be more open with who they are and be more comfortable with just expressing themselves and their ideologies and who they are as a person, be that, just how they vote, or if that's who they love or how they identify or anything, like giving them that confidence of, I'm not the only one out here, I'm not the odd one out, I'm not weird, I have the ability to do this, and people will accept me and love me even if it's not necessarily my neighbor. And taking kind of that step, because obviously we'd like to see a lot more people do what we do, like obviously we don't want the competition. It's hard out here in the TikTok and the social media world to keep things rolling, especially when they change stuff on us all the time and try to figure out every way possible to not pay us for what we do. But we want people to continue spreading these messages and identifying with other people who feel that way. And obviously, like, when you start putting yourself out there in the world, especially on social media, you get a fair amount of hate, a lot of haters, so to speak. And they say it's really easy to say the worst of the worst things when you get to hide behind anonymous username and screen name. And like I said, for me, that stuff fuels me. I kind of get sad when people start to shut up because they're either not like, TikTok has figured out how to redirect my content away from the people who hate me, or they've learned that they don't want to be on the other end of some of my content. But that was what I derived a lot of my content from. I'm like, please, by all means, attack me. It gives me something I don't have to think about when I can come back at it. But again, I'm a straight white rural man who is very traditionally fits into society, and I don't have a whole lot you can pick on that's going to tear me down. I'm very confident and comfortable in who I am, and there's really not, like, you can't say I live in my parents' basement, or you can, but it's not true. I own my own property. I have any of the standard insults aren't really going to work. You can comment on my height or my hairline, and that's about as personal as you're going to get with me. And but obviously you growing up and doing this as an openly gay man and all that kind of stuff. And I noticed you made a video about this at one point. It's kind of like, how do you deal with the hate comments? And it doesn't bother you that much, but what does bother you? How have you learned to work through that? And what advice would you give to other people who want to be more outspoken, not necessarily even on the internet, but just in general, to how they're going to deal with those criticisms and that coming back and having those attacks that are so often personal? Because it's often not your ideology, it's not your opinions, it's not your beliefs, it's you that gets so often attacked. And it's very different than your ideas are stupid versus you are a fucking horrible person or a moron or whatever horrible things that they can come up and say.
Yeah, it is really, 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 really fun to talk about this, because I have quite a I don't know, unique perspective maybe. So I would like to say that this answer is more targeted to our progressive liberal viewers, because I don't think that there's probably a whole lot of conservative people out there listening. So I'm going to talk about the hate that I get from our audience, from our own people that are in fighting for the cause, so to speak. One of the most hateful sort of messages that I get that feels like people are attacking me as a person are from my own community, from people who are like, I'm trying so hard to advocate for and to fight for. Something I get a lot, when I speak on body positivity, despite having my own issues with eating disorders and my own body image problems and all these things, I hear the phrase oh, you don't speak for us, and oh, you don't speak, you're not plus size, so you don't get to talk for plus size people. And I would say those hate comments are always the most I have the most visceral reaction, because I think within our own community, we get so involved in again, going back to the identity politics. And I think a lot of times it becomes truly the oppression Olympics. I know that's
it does.
That's been co-opted by a lot of hate groups, but I do think that the term oppression Olympics is a very important thing to reflect on for our community. So if you're out there and you're progressive, or you pride yourself on being this person that is outspoken for other people, and you are participating in the oppression Olympics culture, I'm begging you, from one person with a platform, who speaks on these problems, you are doing so much harm to the cause. You have to really, really uplift the voices that are reaching the audiences. And you need to, if you're offended by the way one person represents you, and I go to your profile and you don't have any videos, you've never made a single video or a single post about the issue, don't come to my comments, right?
No.
Don't come to my platform and tell me what I am speaking on wrong. You go advocate for your like the way you perceive the world to be and the things that you think needs to change. Go be the voice. Go spread the word, because at the end of the day, myself and you guys, we're all just normal guys. We're just normal people who picked up a camera one day and started going, started talking. So I know I kind of got maybe a little bit aggressive there.
No, not at all.
Just speaking to my own audience, to our audiences, y'all really, really have to stop putting people who are fighting for your cause down when there are bigger fish to fry. So I don't even know if that answered the question, but I just started seeing red at one point.
It didn't, but I want to touch on that, and then I'll circle back to the question again, because I agree, especially coming into an election year. You see this a lot, is you get these circular firing squads of people who 90% of the time we agree on 99% of the stuff. And then you start getting here and people get really honed in on one issue. And this issue means more to me than anything in the world. And it means more to me than it means to anybody else. And if you don't see it exactly the way I see it, then, you are the opposite. And it's gone as far as I've been called blue MAGA because I'm like, you know what? I get both Trump and Biden suck. And I am not I wish we had other options, but I also am a pragmatic person who understands how, basic civics works. And your vote for RFK or your stand back isn't going. If you and I try to preface this, I'm like, if you're doing this because you feel like this is the best way for your voice to be heard, then great. Just do it knowing that this person is not going to win, and vote down ballot and make sure that you're not sitting out everything else. You're doing what you can do. And I'm not going to tell you how to cast your vote. I'm just telling you that if you're going to do it with the right perception, because I want all of the same things that you want. And this is the most pragmatic way to get there. And by saying that, I'm on your side, and they come with pitchforks and torches. And then the same exact thing happens to the people to the, oh, Biden's a great president. And, if you talk on Palestine, you're, being anti-Semitic and all of this kind of shit. And then it all falls in from that side. And you have these little factions of people on the left who are constantly at each other's throat. And we just tear all of the things that are important to us, all these important topics that we tear them apart because one person isn't exactly going about fixing it the way that we think they should be going about fixing it right now in this moment. And it makes me want to pull my hair out every day right now. You
need all of it.
I do. It's going fast. But
that was a low blow.
Yeah, it's fine. Like I said, I can handle the criticism. I get it all the time. But that's the thing. You get those comments. Back to my original question of you get the personal attacks, and a lot of times it's really hard. People take it really personally, and you lose sleep over it. And I've had a few, where you lose a little sleep. You sit there and think about man, why the fuck did they say that? And this is what I want to say, and you get kind of heated about it and that sort of thing. And it's always kind of the stuff that catches you off guard. When you were saying, it's attacks on who you are as a person. When people don't view you as a good person, those are the ones that bug you the most and kind of sit with you wrong.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. Everybody has that thing. If it's a body positivity thing, if you're not, fitting into the archetype of what people expect to see when they see somebody on their screen, and you want to go talk about something, and maybe you're a little heavier set, or there's something physically about you that you don't like, and that's easy for people to attack, they're going to attack it when you put yourself out there, no matter what you do. Any one of those things, and that can be one of those barriers for people who do want to advocate more or maybe speak up and try to shift this perception so more people can be comfortable in their skin, in their hometowns, and in the world that they live in. Do you have any advice for how you deal with that?
Yeah, I will say that the number one thing that I tell people when if I have friends that come to me and they say, hey, I want to do this, or I want to start doing social media, or et cetera, I always tell them, listen, you're going to get hate comments. Okay. It doesn't matter what you're posting. It doesn't matter if you're doing dances. It doesn't matter if you're just doing get ready with me, whatever. You're going to get a form of hate comments, like no matter what you do. But I think my biggest piece of advice, I heard this somewhere, so I'm kind of stealing my answer from someone else, but imagine if that person were in a room with you and like 20 other people, okay? And imagine that they said that exact comment out loud to you. Or, you know, if you're having a discussion, whatever, imagine how the other people in the room would react. If it's like, what did you just say? Why would you say that? Then the chances are like that person is speaking from a place of just, you know, pure anonymity. Like there's no reason for them to filter the way that they, you know, misquote whatever. Like, just think of it. If that person was saying it to you in real life, does it still affect you? Chances are probably not. You realize that person is just kind of like off their rocker. So that is my biggest piece of advice to anyone who's like starting. Just it's gonna be there. Hate's gonna be there always. But you just gotta keep going. Keep going.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. I had not heard that one before, but I like that a lot. That's
It makes me think of like a Jubilee film, like where if you're sitting in a Jubilee and you have like 5 people sitting behind you and you're supposed to like read hateful comments on YouTube or something, or like on the internet, and like you'd have those like 5 people behind you being like, "That's fucked up, man," and you're like, "Okay, like I can get through that."
Yeah,
like, that kind of reminds me of
hit me up, Jubilee. I'm down.
that feels like a segment. I don't know.
I like it. We actually that would be a fun segment. I'd be up for that. Just reading hate comments. Honestly, just going through and reading hate comments.
Right, you know how they do like the most Google like stuff. Yeah, but for hate comments.
Yeah, that would be.
It sounds a little traumatic.
I'm down,
but
dude.
good.
Well, you take their power away too when you make light of it, and honestly, that's why I always address them. I think so upfront. Like I won't back down from a hate comment, and usually I'll highlight it. And like I don't want it to be taken down for community guideline violations. I want that to be there. I want them to feel the repercussions of their actions of saying something stupid on the internet, but also like I want people to see that people can say this and we can go on with their lives and be okay with it and move forward. And when you do that, when you highlight it and address it, it takes its power away. You know, it's not internalized. It's out there. It's like, hey, you said this, you wanted the attention. I'll give you all the attention you want on it. There you go. Now what? And I think that has a lot of power that I think a lot of people struggle with. And it doesn't need to be, you know, I definitely have a certain brand of sarcasm and witty insults that doesn't fit for everybody. But even just bringing it up, and you can say it very straightforward, is like, hey, you called me this name, you said this very hateful thing, and here it is. Congrats. I read it. I hope you feel good about yourself, and leave it at that. And they can, and it takes its power away right there. It doesn't even need to be a rebuttal to that person. It's just an acknowledgement that I saw it, and it has no effect on me. And as soon as you say that, it takes a lot of that effect it has on you away.
Absolutely, yeah.
I feel like you'd spend all day doing that sometimes, though.
I do. I get a little carried away, and obviously, yeah. I have my problems. Okay, I know it. But anyway, I appreciate you hanging out here with us and having this conversation. It was a really great time. It was really awesome meeting you. I've been a big fan for a long time. And it was really cool when you reached out to me and said you'd be willing to do anything if I ever thought that you could help with my message, and I hope that I can help with yours with this. I think our message is pretty much the same in a lot of situations, but I really enjoyed having you as a guest. Is there anything you want to plug here while we're at it?
Well, thank you so very much for bringing me in. This honestly was so fun, and I love to get to connect with people because, you know, here there's not a whole lot of people who are like-minded. I think it's kind of a rare find. So again, thank you so much for bringing me on. And yeah, I do have a clothing line where we're real big on diversity, and it's Stag Pride, STAGPRIDE.com. And we have some really great stuff on there. And other than that, no, I think my social media should be at Tate Hoskins. Just Google it and you can find me on whatever you want to find me on. If you're a fan of sex work and you know, go on there. And if not, it's all right. I got TikTok too. So yeah, that's about it for me.
I was surprised because I searched for you on Instagram and you did not come up, and then I went through the Instagram link on your TikTok and it brought me to you, but I don't know why, because I typed in Tate Hoskins on Instagram and it brought up Tate Hoskins, but none of them were you.
It's at real Tate Hoskins, because someone has my handle. So
okay.
Real REAL.
All right, so real Tate Hoskins on Instagram, Tate Hoskins everywhere else. Yeah, check out the sexy stuff he does and the sexy stuff you sell.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, and I as always, we appreciate you guys watching, listening, tuning in. We have some stuff now that Taylor got set up.
Yeah, we now finally have a Patreon account, so we'd really appreciate any Patreon subscribers. You know, we have a membership as low as $1 a month. You know, it's a quarter an episode for us, so hopefully it's pretty reasonable for everybody who just wants to just show a little bit of support. Every little bit matters, and really helps us continue to make content.
It absolutely does. And yeah, if nothing else, just to say that you appreciate what we're doing. It means a lot to us when we see that you're willing to throw a little bit of money behind the content that we make, because obviously it's hard to gauge how people feel about it unless you let us know, and that's one way. But even if you can't do that, we understand that financials are always hard for people in any situation in life. So
yeah, just leave a comment. Let us know what you want to hear.
Any engagement at all, and just we do it because you guys listen, not because you pay us. So we appreciate you being here, no matter who you are and what you are. And if you want merch, offjowagon.com has all of my merch. You can follow me on offjowagon on all of the socials, and then also we have the Let Them Eat Toast podcast merch there as well. Once again, thank you so much, Tate, for being here. Thank you so much, everybody else, for tuning in, and we will see you next week.